Welcome to the Tuesday, August 16th, regular council meeting. We'll begin with roll call.
Councilmember Babcock.
Present.
Councilmember Brookover. Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
Mayor Bacon.
Present. Yeah. Go ahead, Jesse.
Before we get into the rest of the agenda, I've got two changes. One, add a vote to excuse Councilmember Brookover. And if we could move item 3.5, which is the closure of Linden Street, onto the business agenda. That's related to my business, so I will need to recuse myself from that. Unless you want to number it differently, I was thinking you could add it as 5.5. I think we can vote on the excuse.
So I'll second the excused. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On item 3.5 of the agenda.
Unless there's a problem with that amendment.
No, I'll second that.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 1.2, approval of the agenda with changes.
I'll move that.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Next up, item 1.3, approval of the minutes to regular council, July 12th, 2022.
I'll move approval. I can second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2.1, written communication received by council or posted to the online packet. That'll be all written communication received before 4 p.m. If you had any other additional written communication, it may not have made the online packet, but we have received that written communication in a paper form. Next up, communication from the audience. On the issue of the sidewalk portion, there will be an actual public hearing for that portion. So if it's outside of that area, you can save that for the public hearing on the sidewalks. If there's anything outside of that, communication from the audience is open. All right. Seeing none, same thing for the online system. If it's for the sidewalk, you'll have time during the public hearing to speak on sidewalks. But if there's any other public comment on the online queue?
In the queue.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hearing none, on to item 3.2, communication for the mayor and council members. Councilperson Babcock?
Thank you. I was thinking about commenting on what a relatively uneventful summer it has been and how nice that was. And then I realized the city of East Lansing has done a lot of events, and all of those happen because a lot of people have been working very hard. And they work hard year-round, and we kind of show up on, say, Jazz Festival weekend and think, oh, this is great, without appreciating all that goes into it. I would also like to acknowledge our DPW workers, because I can't imagine a harder job on a 90-degree day than working DPW. And they've been at it. We never noticed an absence, which means we are fortunate enough to take it for granted, but we really ought to acknowledge them. So I'd like to say thank you to them. That's it.
Councilperson Watson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg?
I think I'm good. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to definitely build upon that and say thank you for what turned into a really beautiful summer of events and just activities, getting things online between parks, between planning, everyone, the entire teams, and how everything went together. Seemed seamless, probably not, but thank you guys for all the work. Thank you to police and fire for keeping us safe throughout the summer. There was a recognition of how well things went from the Hospitality Commission and they were surprised. But I knew you guys would be prepared for kind of anything that happened, and the summer went beautifully so far. Fingers crossed as we prepare for the students to return and create a brand new dynamic. But thank you for the success of this summer, and kudos to all our teams and everyone in the city. And next up, I know they're already arriving. I want to welcome MSU students. I know some they're already starting to move in and take their place in the community. We welcome them and look forward to adding them and just going and having a really fun and safe school year here, and we're just really excited about it. And I also want to welcome, I know some kids are beginning to kind of get back into school activities, different sports and different activities are picking up again. So I wish them a safe season, safe everything as they begin to return back to regular activities in school and sports, and I really look forward to that time of year. It's my favorite time of year. So looking forward to it. And I think there's probably more stuff, but I'll get to it. We're all a little rusty at this, so you'll have to excuse my rustiness as we get back to regular sessions. So looking forward to it, and look forward to seeing everyone out and about in the community and just welcoming our students back, because they're really the lifeblood of East Lansing. So we're looking forward to seeing you. Next up, City Manager's Report, item 2.4.
Thank you, Mayor. Just along the same lines, to welcome our student residents back. The city's getting a lot busier in terms of a little bit of congestion downtown. I think it's great. East Lansing is a great university community, and it's our students that make that happen. So looking forward to welcoming our student residents back. Hope they really enjoy the year, have a good, safe year in East Lansing, and make use of all the great amenities and things that East Lansing has to offer. That's all. Thank you.
I'm going to pull it back real quick. I almost forgot to acknowledge that our city manager and city staff, we hosted the Big Ten City Managers. It's so far in between meetings, I lose track of all the things that have taken place, but excellent event for the staff, for our city manager, getting to host them. They were here, they were seeing what we were doing, they were excited, they had their scratch pads, and they were writing down and just lots of good ideas. I was able to welcome them, and then they were just really treated to the things that we have going right, and I'm sure we took some ideas of things that we can do better as well. But I really felt a few members were even from Michigan State who are now city managers in other areas or other municipalities, and they were just blown away by the work that's been done here in East Lansing and are excited to be back and things like that. So it was a wonderful event. I was happy to meet individuals from the Big Ten, and we were happy to host, and it was excellent. It went off without a hitch, and I just thank George and the staff for everything going so perfectly. I know they were impressed by East Lansing, so I didn't want to forget that.
Thanks,
City Attorney's Report.
I have nothing to report this evening.
I never like to say that. This is going good. There is no such thing. All right. The consent agenda.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We have the following items on the consent agenda for council's consideration. Item 3.1, approve the following appointments or reappointments to boards or commissions. A, Matt Boyd to the Planning Commission for a partial term ending December 31st, 2024. 3.2, approve a resolution acknowledging the 50th anniversary of the East Lansing Links. Item 3.3, approve a resolution to amend the fiscal year 2023 budget of the City of East Lansing to include reinspection fee for Class 4 rental licenses in the amount of $85. Item 3.4, approve alley closures in the 400 and 500 blocks of downtown East Lansing for the MSU Drawing Marathon scheduled on September 21st, 2022. Item 3.5 has been moved to the business agenda. Item 3.6, approve the street closures for the MSU Homecoming Parade on October 14th, 2022, including Abbott Road from Burcham to Grand River from 5:30 to 7:15 p.m., Grand River between Abbott and Farm Lane from 5:30 to 7:15 p.m., and 7 additional streets listed in this request from approximately 2:30 p.m. to approximately 7:15 p.m. 3.7, approve a contract with Gordon Construction Services, LLC, in the amount of $965,000 for the renovation of the East Lansing Fire Station Number 1 and authorize the city manager to sign. Furthermore, allocate an additional $100,000 for a project contingency. American Rescue Plan Act funds are allocated in fiscal year 2023 for this project. Item 3.5, approve change order number 1 to the Northern Tier Trail Repair and Replacement Contract with Anderson Fisher Incorporated in the amount of $149,522 to remove and replace an additional 1,400 linear feet of the Northern Tier Trail. Funds for this change order are available from an allocation from the Ingham County Trails and Parks Millage. Item 3.9, approve a conditional Class 3 rental license for 1621 and 1623 Parkvale Avenue, allowing up to 2 unrelated persons or a family to occupy each unit of the two-unit structure. The Housing Commission added 2 conditions to the rental license for the first year. The owners are Anand Ariappan and Hamavathi Doraswamy, Ypsilanti, Michigan. The local legal agent is Renaissance Property Management, Kipling Wilson, Okemos, Michigan. Item 3.10, approve a conditional Class 3 rental license for 400 Hillside, Unit 1, allowing up to 2 unrelated persons or a family to occupy the unit. The owner is Ola Sido, Clarkson, Michigan. Item 3.11, approve a conditional Class 3 rental license for 4096 Palomino Drive, allowing up to 2 unrelated persons or a family to occupy the dwelling, with the additional condition that the owner submit an updated application with a legal agent in state. The owner is Gopri Krishna Reddy Avuri, Harker Heights, Texas. The legal agent is Vijaya Lakshma Dometi, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Item 3.12, approve an intergovernmental agreement with the Clinton County Road Commission to utilize their paving contractor to mill and resurface Coolidge Road and West Road, and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.13, approve a contract with ENG Incorporated for the engineering, design, and construction services for the fiscal year 23 local neighborhood water main replacement and roadway improvements project in an amount not to exceed $302,229, and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.14, approve an agreement with Road Professional Services Company for engineering and services associated with the fiscal year 2023 major street improvements on Coolidge Road in an amount not to exceed $183,531, and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.15, approve a resolution to execute the cost-sharing agreement with the Michigan Department of Transportation, Mdot, for the road resurfacing project on Burcham Drive, sidewalk installation on Burcham Drive and Hazlitt Road, and the Safe Routes to Schools sidewalk installation on Snyder Road. Item 3.16, approve a contract with Tetra Tech Incorporated for the design and improvements to the improvements to the administration building at the Water Resource Recovery Facility, WRF, in the amount of $785,502, and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.17, approve the fuel system improvements proposals from Leak Petroleum Equipment Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $76,699.96, and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.18, approve a contract with Fishbeck for the design of the SRF 2023 Collection System Improvements Project in the amount of $1,681,437.51, and authorize the city manager to sign. Those are all the items on the consent agenda for council's consideration.
I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda with changes.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Oppose? Consent agenda, motion carries. On to item 4.1, consideration of amendments to East Lansing City Community Development Block Grant Program Citizens Participation Plan.
Good evening, council. Alrighty, yep, so the Citizen Participation Plan, we've had a public notice for this public hearing out. Citizens Participation Plan is basically, think of it as like the rules for governing how we internally run our East Lansing Community Development Block Grant Program. Things like public notices for public hearings, our budgetary process, and how we do substantial amendments. And about this time last year, we did the CD Advisory Committee and added that in for the last year's budgetary process, and it was flexible with our CPP, our Citizen Participation Plan, where we didn't necessarily have to amend it in order to add in additional public hearings and other meetings like that. But we were just looking to codify the CD Advisory Committee's role within the CDBG process. With these amendments, among other things, we'd be having the first of 2 public hearings be done by the CD Advisory Committee, and then you guys would take the second one. We also, in accordance with HUD guidance, are looking to transition our internal documentation from principally physical to principally virtual. So yes, among other things, that would just be organizational and grammatical amendments to the CPP. The motion for today, if you go to the last slide, is just whether or not you would like to approve the CPP. Happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Questions?
This is sort of your starring moment. Councilmember Watson, I'll defer to you.
I don't have a question. I am going to make a change request or motion for a change to the composition of the CDBG Advisory Committee. And so should I do that now, or do you want me to ask a question?
Go ahead.
If you look at the, I can't remember, it's a policy number or something, 2021-17.
Yes.
It breaks down what commissions will be tapped for the CDBG Advisory Board. And in the past, a planning commissioner was one of the commissions that would be tapped. And it appeared to have changed to a Parks and Rec commissioner. And I know that I was on council when we approved that, but then during our CDBG discussions, Parks and Recreation asked for funding, and it felt and appeared conflictual. And so no other, and I know that, the commissioners don't get paid out of, Parks and Rec, but to me, like, obviously, that commissioner might be passionate about the dollars or the things that Parks and Rec is doing in a possible unfair way to the representation that's being asked for the CDBG advisory group. And so I'd like to make a motion to exchange the Parks and Rec Commission out and place back in a planning commissioner.
I'll second. Discussion?
I guess I'm curious about what the thought was in putting a Parks and Rec. I guess like my mind is kind of circulating some possibilities. Just I think like parks being one of the areas that we can use CBGG money for, and so having somebody that is familiar with our plan on the advisory board does make sense. I hear what Councilmember Watson is saying about the appearance of conflict, but I think like there's really no conflict when it's us promoting us, right? Like whether the commission comes to advocate for themselves or whether the advisory commission is advocating for our strategic priorities, it's internal. And so like there's not really a conflict per se, other than the fact that there's never enough money for everyone, right? So I guess I'm kind of curious on what the thought was of putting a Parks Commissioner on the CBDG Advisory Board, and then are we limited the number? Can we just add a Planning Commissioner as well to kind of represent that viewpoint as opposed to replacing them?
So generally speaking, we sought out sort of like an interdisciplinary group of individuals for CD Advisory. We originally included a Parks and Rec member because one of the eligible activities for CDBG funding is park improvements, similar to like having a Housing Commission representative
Right.
or someone from the Transportation Commission who's very involved with Department of Public Works, for
Right.
instance, for the sidewalk improvements.
The difference being that transportation and housing don't have projects that they develop the way that our Parks Department has projects that they develop.
Yes.
Which is kind of like, so housing is never going to be advocating for a program the way that the Parks Commissioner would be, which I think is what Councilmember Watson was kind of getting at. Okay.
Yes, yeah, and on our end of things, we are happy to add or remove at your behest. I would say if you're going to add somebody, just make sure, keep in mind that would make us like 8 members.
Oh,
So
yeah.
for voting purposes, we were hoping to keep an odd number, but again, especially in the container of this motion, we could still have this get approved. There's no like specifics about who's in the CD advisory committee. It's just per that resolution. So if you amend that resolution, this could stay the same if we're.
And when does that body convene to discuss next year's funding? the advisory commission? When do they start to do their work?
So we're laying out the calendar this month for CD advisory for this upcoming year, but typically the budget process is going to happen from like December to March or April.
Okay.
We're hoping to have like an informational meeting to kind of teach them about CDBG before those initial meetings in like late November, early December.
Okay, so we have a little bit of time if we wanted to consider. I guess I would prefer to vote only on what we've been presented with in the proposal, just because I haven't had a chance to go back and look at the document that Councilmember Watson is referencing, and so I'm just not really comfortable making a switch that's that permanent without prepping for it. So.
And I will say, I think as long as we did it at like the next council meeting or the one after
Right.
that, I think we'd be in good shape.
Right, and that would give me plenty of time to review what we're looking at. So, I think I don't know where we're at with what's been proposed.
So I think what we need to do, the reference change would be to policy resolution 2021-17, which isn't really in front of you today. So what I can do is make those draft changes for your review at the next meeting. So we would just, if everyone's in agreement, then the councilwoman would just remove her proposal for a second,
Okay.
or for an amendment rather.
Would that be okay, Dana?
Okay.
Okay.
And just to give my context to that, having sat on parks and just understanding the level of always attempting to be above board, if Councilperson Watson's even picking that out as something that could even present the visibility of a conflict, which it may or may not be, I think that's enough to maybe reconsider how it's designed, just for appearances, because I know that's a huge part of parks and a lot of their funding coming from outside. Appearances matter, so I think it's just important to be very clean. So, okay. All right, from that point then, so that's gone. All right, any more questions? All right, if there's no more questions.
So is this a public hearing?
I'm going to open it, yeah.
Okay.
On item 4.1, I'll open the public hearing now. So that's if anyone's in person for consideration of amendment to City of East Lansing Community Development Block Grant Program Citizen Participation Plan. Anyone in person, feel free to comment. Seeing none in person, anyone in the online queue?
There are no callers in line.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing none in the online queue, we'll close the public hearing. Is that all for this one at this time?
Move on to the motion.
Yes, if somebody wanted to
Okay.
Yeah.
address a motion.
I'll move approval of the proposed updates to the City of East Lansing's CDBG Citizen Participation Plan. That's too many tongue-tied, sorry.
I always mess it up.
I think we know.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Oppose? Item 4.1 carries. On to item 4.2, public hearing in accordance with ordinance number 1206 for property owners in the Hazardous Sidewalk project to contest the need for sidewalk repair. Furthermore, consideration of a resolution to order the repair of sidewalk at all locations, including the list attached to this request.
Good evening, Council. I'm Nicole McPherson, Acting Director of Public Works for the City of East Lansing. So the public hearing before you tonight is associated with the Hazardous Sidewalk Program for the Chesterfield neighborhood as part of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that were allocated to improve sidewalk throughout the city. Our engineering staff went out and performed sidewalk inspections on kind of the west side of the Chesterfield neighborhood and identified sidewalks that needed to be replaced either by the city or by the residents per the ordinance number 1206. So as part of that ordinance, we identified that today be reserved for a public hearing for residents to come and provide you with their comments associated with the inspections that we performed. So tonight is an opportunity to hear from the residents based on the inspections that we performed. We sent letters out at the end of June, and we have followed up with some conversations with each of the residents that have reserved the right to come before you tonight. We've adjusted our sidewalk quantities, and we've relooked at things where necessary. So I'm here for any questions that you may have.
Any questions from council?
I guess I'm just kind of, because of the one letter that we received late today from a resident that said that they kind of weren't aware of what the criteria was when they were given the list of squares to be repaired. Can we just kind of get like a brief summary of what would constitute a sidewalk that would need to be replaced?
Sure. Let me just get my note here. So typically when we go through this, we look at our hazardous sidewalk criteria, which was adopted in 2016. So that indicates vertical displacement between a sidewalk section at any point is greater than 1 inch. When a piece or pieces of sidewalk are missing within a sidewalk section, when a sidewalk section is cracked in a manner that may contribute to sidewalk settlement or further deterioration, when the surface of a sidewalk section has eroded excessively, when sidewalk sections have settled in a manner that causes excessive ponding of water, when 3/4 of an inch or greater gap exists between sidewalk sections, when any cross slope of any sidewalk section that is greater than 4%, constructability of any sidewalk. So if there is no sidewalk there in front of a property, City Council has the right to be able to order in that section of sidewalk. And the last one is when the opinion of the city engineer, the condition of the sidewalk is considered hazardous to the safety of the general public.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilperson Babcock?
Thank you. Again, referring to the letter we received late this afternoon, how did the city communicate with residents who had these sidewalks?
So we sent letters to all of the properties that we had identified would be responsible for a portion of the work in front of their house. So we sent letters and requested, a forms be sent back to us to be able to indicate if they wanted to repair the sidewalk themselves or if they wanted us to repair it through our hazardous sidewalk contractor. That was June 24th.
Okay. So the letter we received from a resident in the neighborhood said they received a letter on June 29, dated June 22nd, and they'd have to decide by July 19, which is fairly short notice, especially to get a contractor on the phone. And as she notes, the 4th of July was in the middle of it. And she says that she spoke with a city engineer on July 18th, and the city didn't know who they were going with. So that seems, putting ourselves in their shoes, that seems like a big rush, and it seems like it came to them as a surprise that if they heard about it in late June. Was there any prior notice? Did anything go out with the tax bills or any general postcards to the neighborhood that this would be coming? Or
No, just our general discussions that we had with, here with wanting to do a hazardous sidewalk program, utilizing the ARPA funds for engaging that, but there was not a specific notice until we went out and started identifying and inspecting the sidewalks throughout the section of Chesterfield Hills. I do agree that we should have put a little bit more time frame, and we are working on that for next year to be able to give a little bit more time between when the letters are sent out and when we're able to get in there with our contractor. The contractor that we did receive bids on for the hazardous sidewalk is under consideration on the business agenda for tonight. So when we were estimating the sidewalk sidewalk costs for each property, we utilized our miscellaneous concrete prices, which is what we use for replacing sidewalk or curb and gutter that was, when we have water main breaks and stuff over the winter, we utilize a miscellaneous concrete contractor to replace those. So as we put those in there, that's considered more of a high end because our miscellaneous concrete price is a little higher because it's spot replacements surrounding the city. So the costs that came in for the hazardous sidewalk program are a little bit less than what was identified in the letters.
Okay. Well, I'm also, and I could be reading this wrong, but it sounds like this resident had an assessment done with an engineer, and I'm implying from the letter that's a city engineer, but would that be a city engineer?
It was our senior project engineer.
Okay. So didn't show up for the first appointment, didn't respond to email about setting up another appointment. Had someone come to the appointment today, which would be today, Tuesday the 16th, 2 hours after the originally scheduled time. And what's going on?
I would have to look into that closer. I'm not sure in regards to that, if that was our field staff or if our city engineer, or not city engineer, our senior engineer.
Okay. Well, I guess the reason I wonder is because we've had other engineering projects that have had great benefit to the city, but haven't necessarily been well communicated to the people who'll be living in the middle of them. And this is a nice letter. This person is not angry, but they were caught off guard, and it sounds like they've really been hassled, and it sounds like everything is coming at them at the very last minute, and that's just not how we treat people. And I'm not casting aspersions at you, but I feel for this person, and I wonder how we're going to do this differently.
So exactly. So as we look at this program for next year, because we have ARPA funds set aside to be able to continue the hazardous sidewalk program into next year for continuing within the Chesterfield neighborhood, we would start that communication instead of in this spring. We would communicate that more in the fall to be able to provide more time.
Well, if we're going to be doing this next year as well, I wonder if those who are back on their heels or feel unprepared to participate this year because of the timeline, if they could defer for a year.
I would have to figure out how many people would need to defer. I mean, it seems feasible to be able to do that.
Okay. I mean, I'm not like trying to pin you down or be weasel lawyer up here. It just seems like a reasonable, if we're going to be doing this over time and some people feel they haven't had time, if we could do that, I think that would be well appreciated. I also know that when you bring in the cement equipment and the contractors, you want to do it in a cohesive fashion. But if we could defer, if others are having this problem, that would be, I think, courteous.
Could I, to ask a question, Councilmember Babcock, I think the money seems to be what is the problem, more so than the disturbance of having, your front walk under construction for a certain period of time. In the interest of kind of keeping the project spread out into a doable chunk, I'm thinking of some of our other big engineering projects that we've run into supply chains and labor problems and things like that. And rather than kind of take another large chunk of contracting work and sort of lump it in with next year's, would there be a way that we could just spread out the payments for people so that the burden was not as great, since it doesn't seem to be the construction that's the problem, but more the payment? And would that accomplish a similar goal to what you're getting at?
It might. That would be individual by individual, but in this case, I think this particular person is weighing whether to go with the city or an individual contractor. Mm-hmm. So that's a decision that they would have to make. It's a little unclear. When do they have to make that decision?
We had required the notices to be back. I believe it was towards that July 19th or date. I'd have to look at the exact date on the letter. So with that, We have not received all of the responses back, and per the letter, if we don't receive a response, it's under the indication that the city would be doing that work in front of the property. And to address your idea of spreading the payment out over multiple years, I have had a discussion with our finance department, and that is something that we would be able to offer if somebody found themselves in a situation that needed to do it over, 2 to 3 years.
Mayor, if I might. Yes. Generally speaking, I mean, I haven't purchased concrete recently. I did this sidewalk project came through my front yard 20 years ago, and I recall going with the city, but the city's volume pricing makes it so that generally speaking, we are much cheaper. Is that your general experience, that we are much cheaper based on our volume of contracting than what another individual could get?
Correct, especially during the supply and chain that we're going through right now. On a separate note, I had somebody come out to my house and to do to quote me some concrete work, and they said, well, we'll come out and look at it, but our minimum price is $3,500. We will not do any work at your house unless it's more than $3,500. So, I mean, in a lot of these cases, we're talking maybe there are like just 1 or 2 sidewalk sections, like squares of sidewalk section, to where it may not be as economical for somebody to do it themselves.
I can appreciate that. It's just they learned in late June that they'd have to come up with $2,000 this summer for a project that they didn't know was coming down the pike. And I think many of us would sort of gasp and think, well, we'd already booked our summer vacation, or we had a use for that. And I think spreading that payment out over years and perhaps deferring any payment whatsoever would be fair.
Yeah, we can definitely look at and work with finance and work with those individuals to make sure that those payments get spread out. And a payment for right now, if we build this project, let's say in November or December, that would not end up, like if people deferred that to be able to go on their tax bill, it wouldn't go on their tax bill until July of '23.
Do we have any way of communicating this to people? Can we send a postcard or even publish something in perhaps the next dialogue? Or we're always looking for story ideas, and that would certainly get people's attention. I know I would certainly read every word of that article. They start talking about, city fees and assessments. For us, that's a headline.
Yeah, absolutely. And, our plan is after tonight's meeting, we are sending another follow-up letter to the residents to be able to say, hey, we said it would be X amount, but the fees from the contract, if it gets approved later tonight, are actually lower based on that, this is the revised amount for your property.
And we could also tell them at that point that they
Yes.
can do up to a 3-year payment plan.
Yes.
It's no secret that my long-term agenda here is to get sidewalks everywhere. So as painless as we make it and as well communicated as we make it, I think the higher the chance of getting sidewalk elsewhere, rather than having people say, oh, no, you don't want that. So we're all working toward the same goal. So thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
I think on the front end definitely is where the challenge is. It needs to be a standardized timeline of if it's 90 days, 120 days, whatever on the front end. It can't be June X for X date. If it's going to be 90 days from this date, you have to decide or have to give them like a uniform time in the first notice, and then deferral, particularly around hardship. It sounded like one of the individuals who mailed in had some hardships around in general paying, and so the deferral thing would have been huge, and maybe right on the initial documentation showing them all their options on the front end, I think would help a lot more. But definitely notice, because this would hit anyone's pocketbook,
And this would be the first time that we've offered a deferral or a payment plan.
Yeah, would is
for
good.
the hazardous sidewalk program, so.
And it's a good pilot. We might need it for something else, so it's good to know how to do it.
Yep.
Okay. Any further questions? All right, seeing none, open up the public hearing. We have a list of predetermined people who made reservation to speak, so I'll go by your address, and I'll just kind of go right down the list in order. If I reach the end and you didn't reserve a space on here, I will still permit you to speak just because of the sensitivity and time sensitivity of the subject. So up first, 504 Highland Avenue, 230 Highland Avenue, 417 Cowley Avenue, 1226 Oak Ridge Avenue, 522 Cowley Avenue,
Okay.
are you,
Yeah, just if you give them to Councilmember Babcock, she can pass them down. Oh, okay.
I'll see.
I guess George can get that scanned in for us.
All right. It's all right. Is that for 522? Okay. All right. And did you wish to make public comment? Or just,
She's got a different address.
oh, different. Oh, that was for,
Yeah,
okay. I'm
she's
still-
representing multiple.
Oh, got it. So, okay, still coming.
Very efficient.
Yep.
Well done.
424 Highland Avenue. 320 Cowley Avenue. 210 Cowley Avenue. 201 Cowley Avenue. 236 Highland Avenue. 525 Highland Avenue. All right. In my hand, I have 1203 West Grand River Avenue.
Okay. I sit on a corner lot. I'm at the corner of Cowley and Grand River. The 522 Cowley letter is my corner neighbors. Yes, the letters were sent out in late June, and we had July 19th as our turnaround date for responding if we were going to use the city contractor or find our own contractor to do the work. I had my meeting with the Public Works on the 18th, or July 18th, that was one of their scheduled days, to review what I felt were discrepancies in terms of what was cited as a resident's responsibility and what was the city's responsibility for repair. I asked for an extension at that meeting because they couldn't answer my questions, okay? Just today at 3:15, I received their response saying that none of the items I asked for re-review were approved, followed by come to the meeting tonight at 7. So, pardon me if I'm not as prepared as I wanted to be. I had just a few hours to get it together, which is why my neighbors sent their letter in, because they saw me outside taking pictures and hustling around. We have, in my zone on a corner lot, you get a lot of traffic, and we have double the amount of sidewalk than anyone else, and so it did come as quite a shock, this dollar value that came through. My neighbors were over $7,000, mine was $3,000. But there's some inequality in terms of how the assessment of the sidewalk squares were done, in terms of how you compare what your markings were on your property compared to the people next to you, down the street from you, previous agencies like that had done the corner cuts, and how that impacted what was left for your sidewalk to be repaired on. So I have a couple of different key areas I'd like to speak on to let you know about. The first one is the curb cutout work that was done for accessibility. That's fantastic work. They came through all of our corners, they widened them, they put the rumble strips in, they replaced certain amount of sidewalk squares on each corner. But there's inequality with how far they went with those repairs. I went through and I measured my intersection, so those 4 corners, and the next intersection down to Kensington. Through those 8 corners total, the average was 6.125 squares per corner. I got 4, someone else got 3, someone got 10, someone got 7. But the why I bring it up is the squares right next to mine on either side of that curb cutout were already identified then as the city right now, saying, these need to be replaced, they're your duty. Where other corners got a whole lot more done for them, so then you have an equality of like, here's a city program that went through and did these things, but they didn't do them equally on what sidewalks needed to be repaired. So now, right now, it's on the homeowners to do that. 522 had their curb cutouts redone, and they were raised, they're higher than the sidewalk square next to it. And so 522 is being asked to replace their sidewalk square because it's lower than what the city put in. So there's just some issues that need to go back and be looked at. Street trees, they create lots of damage, and I really do feel like I was the property that spawned this zone because I had a water leak at my house in 2019 that the city came through and repaired because you had the program for doing the galvanized pipe repair if it was the line from the curb to your house. So they came through, they did that. They had to tear up my apron because it was so late in the fall when they did the work. They didn't repair the apron, they just put crushed stone down. And at that point, they're like, we can't do any pavement work because it's too late in the year with the frost. I get that. I have a lot of masonry work at my house. So they left it. And when they were coming back, I said, how about the rest of the sidewalk damage that was caused?
30 seconds remaining.
Oh, I didn't know I had any time limit. That's unfortunate.
That was my fault.
Yeah, that's not going to work for me. Sorry. They had crushed stone down for over a year, and that crushed stone moved out onto my sidewalk, and we ran over it every single day. Foot traffic ran over it. Snow blowers ran over it, and it totally destroyed that sidewalk zone. Those are 4 squares that I asked for the city to look at, and they denied that request, saying that anything that they had done for the repair or the lack of timely repair of that crushed stone didn't qualify. And so now those are on mine. The pitting on those are huge.
Hold
And
one
it's-
second.
it's
for
very
me.
frustrating.
Hold on 1 second. I'll extend 5 minutes since he's representing multiple parties. I'll let you have 5 more minutes. Go ahead.
May I ask if if her volume can get turned up some too, please?
Okay, and I'll talk closer. I'm a quiet talker. So, but again, I've had city.
Thank you.
And I wrote the city multiple times to get the stonework repaired. I asked them about those sidewalks throughout the years, and I have the timeline of all those emails and like their neglect to respond back to me about that. So there they sat damaging the sidewalks so longer. But with that then, they said they weren't going to do anything until they looked at my street tree because they thought, oh, we really do need to repair your street tree sidewalk, but we think maybe your tree is dying. So then it took a whole nother year for them to assess that my tree was dying, and they finally cut it down this spring, followed by the little pink notes on everyone's sidewalks because they had to come do the street tree sidewalk that they just cut down, and my whole neighborhood got zones of stickers. So I feel really targeted on this. But with the street trees, you get a certain amount of coverage for heaving caused by the city street tree, and can even get the same coverage. If there's a heave that caused the next sidewalk to be lower, my neighbors to the south of me got those lower sidewalks covered. I didn't. It's the exact same scenario, but it's not covered for me, but it's covered for them. We have one neighbor south of me who has a street tree and then nothing for 7 more squares. There was never a street tree there covered, but the city's covering the next 7 squares for no particular reason. We don't know why. So if you can just get 7 squares covered by the city for never having a street tree there, I want the same 7 squares. Okay? And for eroded surfaces, that's the pocking that they talk about on the top. Like, is it eroding? Great, yeah. If you got a big divot, got you. But a pockmark? I have pockmarks. I asked for them to be reevaluated. So did some of my other neighbors. They got theirs reevaluated and cited as not needing to be redone. Mine were exactly the same and told I still had to redo them. So I don't know if it's just because I came with so many different things, but none of mine were reevaluated and none of them were approved, and I just learned about it today. The letter that we received, again, from the city didn't tell us when our fees were due, and so it was very frustrating. And we both sit on corner lots, Grand River, high foot traffic. I sit on the southern side of Grand River at this corner. I have 1 foot of green space between the road and the sidewalk, where the northern side has up to 5 feet or more, where they can build bushes and plant, natural surroundings to keep the snow, the ice, the cars, because I just had a car hit my house, out of their yards. So, you gotta take into account what you guys put on the roads hit our sidewalks, and they're public sidewalks. So where's the shared cost for that kind of element? I get my pride, on Cowley, sure, that's more of a neighborhood zone, but we're talking public use space at a high foot traffic and gets a lot of road damage. So I think the reevaluation needs to be done. It needs to be done by an independent party, because this person who did the first one, I met with at the meeting, and she said she came out and did it again, but I never saw her. She never set an appointment with me. I just got a notification today that nothing was approved. So that's where I'm at. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions? Thank you.
Okay. Would you like my written material? Okay. Am I allowed to come up to you? Okay.
This is, if you want to just pass that down for review, that's the address that she was representing.
Thank you. I guess I'd like to hear an answer from Director McPherson, if she can answer for some of these. I don't know a lot about concrete,
Hold on.
so.
Hold on, Councilperson. I'm going to make sure there's no one else in the public
Oh,
queue.
of course. Thank you.
All right. Anyone who wasn't on that list in that public queue for reservation, will allow you 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Hello. I live at 333 Cowley. My name's Mike Swift. I just want to reiterate, as the councilwoman has pointed out, this came really fast, especially if you weren't in town when that letter came and you was kind of stuck scrambling. I also had difficulty getting through to the technician in the office to have her come out. I had questions about how they, designate it, and we've been through all that right now, so I'm not going to rehash that. But I'd still like to have somebody come out from the engineering department and show me why some of these squares need to be replaced. And I think extending the time to do that would be appropriate and fair, based on you're seeing how it kind of got rushed at this point for us guinea pigs here on the first phase. So I think you should try and give some more time for this to process more fairly. And secondly, I was curious as to, this is, as the first lady mentioned, these are all public sidewalks, and they're part of the city's infrastructure. Why, are there any other funds, infrastructure funds, whether federal or state, that could be partially offset these costs, or, help pay for these? Because a lot of these people here are on some limited incomes. So that's my question to you folks. And I made my request to extend it so we can get this more quick or fairly administered. And you just kind of felt like you were being pushed in a corner. And I understand how you can make changes later, but I think you have to make those kind of changes for the people right now also, because just because they were first doesn't mean they have to be taken advantage of just because of process wasn't quite thought out properly. And that's really it. I just wondered, I was concerned why we couldn't try and avail ourselves of some other funding also, because it's been a rough couple of years here, so. And plus, now we got taxes due now. Most people's house insurance are due. Lord knows what other type of bills people have, but it's not a good time of year to be trying to absorb a 4-digit cost that you weren't planning on. So, whatever feedback you can give me to that, I appreciate it, because that's really what concerns me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diane Wing. I live at 1024 Huntington Road in the Chesterfield Hills neighborhood, not part of the sidewalk. I'm sort of grabbing here within the past 24 hours. I read the agenda and thought, uh-oh, things are happening. So I understand that this is being paid for by ARPA funds. What's the dollar amount of ARPA funds?
Just to be clear, the ARPA funds are being used to cover the city portions of the sidewalks. It's not being spread out over the ones that have been determined to be the responsibility of the homeowners. So we've got about, if this contract is approved tonight, it will be about $500,000 worth of money that's going in from ARPA for the city portion of the sidewalk repairs.
And the city portion is still the same section of Chesterfield Hills that we're talking about, correct? So those ARPA funds are still on Highland, Cowley, Michigan, Westview?
Right, for that initial western section of Chesterfield is where we identified, to utilize the first component of ARPA funds. So we're actually utilizing about $250,000 of ARPA funds to cover the city portion, and the remainder of that is falls on the property owners within the neighborhoods.
Okay, so we're getting $400,000 worth of ARPA funds and $250,000 is being spent, so where's the rest of the money? Sorry, can't do the math that quick.
Next year's. This is happening again next year. So that there's
Okay.
two different sets.
Correct.
Hold on. Technically, the public comment's not designed as a Q&A,
Yeah.
so if you have direct comment to
Okay.
council or to staff.
So here's a comment then. I know that the community development block grants always have sidewalk repair in them. As a matter of fact, it was mentioned just a little while ago during that discussion. And I always wonder, why is it that the development block grants always go to the downtown area for sidewalk repair? And I know that there has to be some level of criteria that's met for the type of use. But let's face it, Michigan Avenue and Grand River Road, why can't the community development block grants be used at least for Michigan and Grand River? I mean, those streets are as heavily trafficked and as heavily used, if not more so, foot traffic-wise, than the ones that are used downtown. So there's an idea right there. Then we get the idea about this time frame. Letters mailed in June, all of a sudden, after how many years of disinvestment in the sidewalks in Chesterfield Hills? I've now lived in Chesterfield Hills for 24 years. Sidewalks have never been touched in 24 years, other than the general repairs or when curb cuts are put in, the accessibility ramps were put in. That's when they're touched. Our sidewalks are in deplorable condition. And if the folks on Highland and Cowley think theirs are bad, you're not even talking about the old part of Chesterfield Hills, and Ms. McPherson knows what I'm talking about. Some of those sidewalks are back from the 1920s, okay? All of a sudden, though, in 2 months, people are expected to cough up this money to fix sidewalks. I know you can't answer my question. What's the hurry? What's the time frame? It's got to be something related to the funds, is my guess. I can only speculate since I can't ask questions and have them answered right now. Would love to understand why the community development block grant can't be used, at least for Michigan Avenue and Grand River. While I'm here, I'd like to also thank Ms. McPherson for all the work in finally getting the sewer smell taken care of down at the bottom of University in Michigan. It's fabulous down there now. Again, it's the disinvestment aspect of these older neighborhoods that we wait and we say, why can't we get things fixed? Will you please help us? Thank you for helping us with that sewer smell, which was disgusting, and it's gone now. Thank you for taking care of our sidewalks, but this is just being mishandled right now. As the gentleman said, why is the first group the one who has to pay the price and be the learning curve? If there's a time frame and it's because of the ARPA funds, perhaps there's a way to move all of this down into next year and you can do more of Chesterfield Hills at the same time, because there's plenty of sidewalks left to do in Chesterfield Hills. Thank you.
Thank you. Floor is open. Seeing none. Anyone in the online?
We do have a caller in the queue. Evan Toss, you're welcome to address council.
Hi, okay, you can hear me.
Yep.
So I live in 230 Highland Avenue, and I've received an assessment just like everyone else, I think, sort of mid-June. That was exactly right after I had my driveway done. And the explanation that I was given was that there was an eroded surface. So when I went to have a meeting with Ms. Lori Bates, in fact, the information that I got was this was the tail end of a project and that they can't come back to this. They have to do this anyhow. And one of the main things she kept saying was that it won't get any better. And there was no criteria that was defined what eroded surface actually meant. So it just, there are a couple of things like the between blocks, if there's like this many inches, then, it makes sense. But with the eroded surface, there's actually no value given that is measurable in the criteria. So I asked them to come over. They unfortunately came when I was not around, and I don't know, I didn't get anything else, any response from them, but I think their response was that it was eroded. And I obviously have a problem with that, because what does that even mean? I mean, I'm an engineer. People in the public works are engineers. If we're talking about a surface that is dangerous, then I think we can actually measure and put a value on it. And the explanation that I got was that it was not going to get any better, and I quote, is not necessarily one that satisfies me. I also have the same objections, just like other participants here, other neighbors. I mean, we get notified about this, and then we need to come up with this money in 2 months or find a company. Even if we said yes right now, which company is available to come and service us? We all know that it's not that simple. Another thing, I actually am not really sure who to go to about this, but this is one of the things that I wonder, who does the sidewalk belong to? This is a capitalist country. We live on certain signed deeds and agreements. And if the sidewalk belongs to me, and we're not talking about just shoveling the snow, we're talking about yanking it out and putting in a brand new one, a couple $1,000s of an expense. And then I really wonder, who does that belong to? It doesn't belong to the city, but it belongs to me. So is it going to be on my deed? I mean, there's a bit of a problem there. And I understand that this is part of the city rules. I'm kind of new in East Lansing, so pardon my not knowing how the way things work. But all these rules are man-made, so we can actually change them if that is the case. Okay, and I've already written a written objection to this, and I've sent it to the Public Works, and I really hope that after this, discussion, that we can actually come to a better understanding of how the process works, both on our side and on the City Council, and make a better use of each other's time. Because at this stage, I've had already through 2 meetings and written letters. I'm a single mom with a toddler, and I had to give him popsicle to actually have this conversation right now. I'm not happy about that popsicle situation. So anyway, thank you for your time, and I will finish.
Thank you. All right. I think that's the end of public comment. All right, at this time, we'll close public comment, the public hearing.
Answer a couple questions, perhaps?
Absolutely.
The first one I wanted to answer was about CDBG. CDBG has very specific guidelines about what neighborhoods it can be used in for infrastructure. So even if it's considered a busy street, it has to be within a district. So I think that we could probably have Matt speak about that, but it's not eligible in that area. If it's not eligible, it's simply not eligible, right? It's a matter of the map and the established areas based on income levels and in areas, right? Is there any further explanation on that, Matt?
I think that's
Yeah. Yeah. The next thing is about, in the state of Michigan, this has been well established that the resident is responsible for sidewalk cost, and that's been, I think it's probably been about 130 years in Michigan. I don't know, Mr. Chubb, if you want to weigh in and tell us the act that talks about that.
Yeah, that's correct. So under state law, it's very consistent across the state also. All of my communities have adopted similar ordinances like we have, which is 38-123, which although the sidewalk is on the right-of-way, our 38-123 notes that it shall in all cases be the duty of the owner of every lot or parcel of land in the city to build sidewalks in front of or adjoining his or her premises, and then to maintain them. And so that is a standard provision, and it has been for, like you said, I believe over a century.
I have a question. Speaking of the sidewalk and who owns it and stuff, can I drink on my sidewalk, alcohol?
So that is a public right-of-way, and it would be, it's not private, and so it would be a misdemeanor, I believe.
That was very lawyery. I like that. Spirit of Mr. Rookover, we miss you. Yeah, I think in the long term, something that will help us, as we're talking about standardization, if there's somewhere to house kind of photographic evidence of what's the difference. And I don't know when individuals go to look for reference points, if they're saying, is this eroded or is this lifted? And what's the difference and what's tree damage? Because as the individuals were speaking, I'm going, I couldn't determine the difference, just for that. If we had a reservoir of photos and types of things, so they could do some of this on their own. In obviously real clear sidewalk criteria. As I said before, definitely something in the 90, 120 day range, even for notice, giving individuals a chance to opt out via hardship or to make a deferral, or if they're going to make some determination around this turn it into an income or a property tax type of thing, and then showing them all the options of payment breakdown, or how to do those types of things, or I think it's all and everything. If we're going to create, this is going to be a brand new program, so I think so far it's just we have to get a little bit more structure around it because it's East Lansing, and that's just kind of what we do.
It's not really a new program. I mean,
well,
this has been the policy and the
well,
responsibility.
I think we've got to treat it the same way with we did with hospitality and with other people. People haven't seen some of this stuff in quite a while, so we're almost let's treat everything like we're reinstituting it, sort of, because we're reintroducing some things. I would have been caught off guard by this bill right here. This would have, and as I'm looking at it now, I don't have school kids in it. This is school clothes. This runs into everything.
Yeah, that's
This is a really detriment back to school sports. I mean, everything enrolls right now, and this is rolling right into that window. And anyone who's a parent or has kids in activities or whatever else, this is a headlong into that time frame. So yes, I'd just like to see us kind of standardize this, create some timelines, look at some areas for hardship, and a few other, just kind of put some standardization out there, and mostly time. I think this would have went a little bit better if people had a little bit more time to absorb this and know what their options were up front. It was just my comments in general. Just we got a little bit of logistical work to do, just so when we roll it out again, we're completely covered and covering the spirit of the law, kind of what we did for hospitality. Just the spirit. It wasn't that anything was wrong with the rule per se, but the way it was landing and the timing of it was difficult for some people. So, Councilperson Babcock.
Thank you. I know that costs are rising, and the faster you do something, the lower the cost may be, although that may be starting to reverse. But I also know that the ARPA funds have to be allocated by a certain point, but not spent until later. And I wonder if, considering the number of people we've heard from who've signed letters, if it would be worth pumping the brakes on this and giving people another chance to reconsider, another chance to meet with the city engineers. I would like to get it done sooner rather than later, but I think in this case, we rushed it too much. And I've long believed that for every person you hear from on an issue, there are 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 others who just didn't get the letter in the mail or didn't know where to email it, so that sort of thing. And as we said, people are out of town. People are getting ready for back to school. Can we delay this for a month or so and send some sort of proactive communication to these homes and say, we're going to give you another chance to look at it if you so choose? Is this possible?
Of course, we can always delay that. The only component to that is we may end up doing it then in the spring as opposed to the fall with construction. And there may be, obviously with the contract that we have tonight, it was, to start in, 10 days or, a month from now and finish towards the end of October. So, we'd have to work with a contractor to be able to see if they would hold their prices until the spring. But of course.
I don't know what, I don't know what the community wants. I don't live in this neighborhood, and I have no dog in this fight. I guess I know we've closed the public hearing, but I'm trying to make eye contact out there. Do I see any?
I'll take it.
Go, Mr. Mayor.
This is my job. I think just if it's going to be a long-term program, we might as well get it perfect before we roll it out more broadly. I think I'd rather see us measure twice and cut once kind of thing. That's just my feeling, so that we have a...
I don't know. I have a lot of sympathy for the people that have gotten an unexpected bill, but I also, like, my whole family is in construction, and construction costs just don't go down. And some of the communication that we've gotten is being written with the assumption that inflation will back off and construction costs will start to fall, and I just don't think that's going to happen. Maybe I'm being really pessimistic right now, but I just, if I was that, concrete contractor, I certainly wouldn't hold my price for 6 months. I would I would say that it needed to be rebid. If we can get them to do that, then that's great. Let's get them to hold that price through the entire program up through next year as well. That would be super awesome. So although, I have every sympathy for these homeowners, I see things actually getting more expensive the longer that we wait. I'm actually looking at my own sidewalk and asking, can I get in on this, I guess, because I've got 2 squares that definitely need to be replaced. And if I could get it at city rates, that would be great. I don't know. I think I would rather push ahead, even though it's going to be painful, and then do what we can on the money side to accommodate people's need in terms of time. Just because I don't see the costs coming down, mainly, is my only concern.
City
I
Manager?
just would like to mention, I think that we ask a lot of our Public Works Department. We have a department with some very high-skill engineers, but we have a ton of projects that we're bidding out to improve the infrastructure of the city, water projects, sewer projects, street projects, now sidewalk projects, where I think we have to start spending the ARPA money. But I think being able to deliver projects like this, that when we can, so it certainly was not perfect, and I certainly wish we could have done it better in terms of timing. But if we are able to, for the first time, give people a significant reduction in the cost per year by saying we could go to a 3-year payment instead of 1 year, I think that's a tremendous bit of relief. And hopefully we can move the project forward with that consideration. And over 3 years, you can figure that is a much different program than we've run in the past. I think that the number of people who are voicing concerns, there are many, many more people who would be happy to have the sidewalks completed and have the sidewalks be in good shape. So it certainly is a trade-off. I do wish we could have communicated it earlier to people, but I also don't want to push and blame our overtaxed engineering department because they're delivering a lot of projects. So it is not perfect, and I certainly apologize that we didn't get it out soon enough. But I don't know if 30 days would have made a difference in anyone's life, especially if we're extending the pricing by a third only per year. That's a very big reduction in what people have to pay in the short term. And, you know, normally it's been people have paid it right then or it's gone to the tax bill. This is a much more favorable way of doing that, and I think that takes into consideration the hardship and the instantaneousness of it and moves it a little bit longer for folks. So
I think are we looking at absolutes here? Can they be a both and? If there's individuals who are prepared to move forward with the project, they move forward or want to select one of the options. If they have a hardship, I can't see how we can move forward with everyone in everyone's circumstance is different. I just wonder, long term, you're going to come across someone with absolute hardship. I can't see how. So I'm looking at this is a long-term program, correct? Or am I misunderstanding?
We would love it to be a long-term project, but you know, historically we've been able to get 100, 150,000, even 200,000 in the past through general fund to be able to put towards a hazardous sidewalk program, and obviously it ebbed and flowed a little bit over the late teens and into the early 20s, and so this is the first time, as you said, it's like we're doing a new program again to get back at that hazardous sidewalk program that started in the 1999.
Yeah, my only challenge with all of it, I just really like standards and uniformity, and whatever happens for one, happen for the other, and we can go right to the process, and if it creates any disparities or whatever, we go to the process.
Yep, I'm all about standards and process, so I understand.
That's what you guys do for a living. But I think that front end miss is the poison pill on all this. That's where my mind's stuck at. The timeline's so tight. People didn't have the option to use all the recourse that would have been available to them. So it's something, we got to fix something for this initial group. I don't say it's an opt-out for everyone, but we need to create some kind of fairness going forward, and then have a standard next time of X amount of days from letter to receipt to something like that. That'll be much better. But I don't want to disadvantage, like it's been said, several disadvantage this first group I consider them a pilot of sorts if we're coming back to this. Is that correct? Are they the pilot for the hazardous? Have we not done this in a while? I'm confused, right?
Well, we just did, we ordered in sidewalk for 4 properties along Michigan Avenue earlier this year in the same methodology, and the last time we did this was about 2017. And actually, in 2018, we did it as part of our road project. So we had a road project that we resurfaced, and we assessed all the sidewalk and performed assessments along Alton and Hagedorn. So that was in the 2018-2019.
Okay. And the Michigan Avenue was residential or commercial, or what was the?
It was commercial.
Well, I don't think the onus of better communication falls solely on Public Works and the engineers, who I agree are overworked and understaffed, but we could also employ communications, and we could employ many of our e-dialogue and many, many other things. What troubles me is this is not the first time in my relatively short tenure that people have come to us and been caught off guard by major infrastructure projects. And I understand that it's hard to catch somebody's attention with many things going on about, sidewalks. Maybe if you send an envelope, okay, I know this from my own experience, postcards are better than envelopes, at least if you're a political hack, because nobody's going to open a politician's envelope. But there are many reasons why things don't stick with people, but we've heard many times that people who are astute and interested and involved in the community are caught off guard by our DPW projects. And we need to change that. I don't know that I could suddenly float a $7,000 bill in a month's time. And I'm sure that's true of many other people. And I really think that as much as I would like to go ahead with this, this may be another situation where, for lack of a better phrase, we broke it, we bought it. I mean, we didn't do the communication right, and we're just going to have to knuckle down and accept the delay and take the time to do it right, because the community deserves that much. And they just deserve more courtesy than this, and they deserve, I understand, if we had engineers meeting with people individually, conversations may go longer, but what was that? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I'm just asking, Mr. McPherson, if we should delay for next year at this point. I think we're hearing from council that you'd prefer us to push this back and rather than go to a vote. But go
I
ahead.
have one question and a possible motion, which you guys can vote down if you want to. Director McPherson, can you break this down in terms of number of squares of property, of the people on this list? Obviously, we've seen from some people a letter and someone here in the audience who has many squares of concrete that they have to replace. Is there kind of a threshold of what the average would be? How many squares did they cite you for?
I have 8.
8.
And I don't have.
Okay. Okay. I was just thinking if we could go ahead with the properties that had smaller amounts of pavement, and then leaving the people with the larger concern to kind of do one more round of appeal process, since they seem to have some fairly great concerns, especially on Michigan Avenue. So, I was basically going to move, consideration of this resolution for properties that had, under a certain number of square foot. I don't know how to phrase that exactly, which is why I'm looking at you.
I can just jump in and say, maybe
Sure.
we can just say if it's people who have an objection. Is there enough people, if the people who have an objection, I think, are a smaller number, does it still make sense to do the project if we give 10 properties an opportunity to opt out till next year and say, do you want to proceed now or do you want to proceed next year? Can the project still be done efficiently, or is it too chopped up to do efficiently?
Well, to give you a basic, we mailed out, I think around 114 letters.
Okay.
And the people that came to the administrative review to be able to be heard in front of city council were 12.
Okay.
So that's
there's
the basis.
theoretically around 100 properties that are kind of just going with the flow.
Correct.
So is it possible to do those 100 properties efficiently, or do you want to delay would you propose delaying the entire project till next summer, or would you propose letting the people who want to opt out, give them the option to opt out till next year and go forward with the people who don't have a problem now? Which is your preference from an engineering perspective of efficiency?
Engineering perspective with efficiency would be to get as many properties as we could done in one chunk, just to be able, because you don't want the contractor to go down, rip out one sidewalk, but then the neighbor, has a separate sidewalk that, that they stop short on, which is fine. I mean, it can be done and we can come back in the following year to do that.
Sir, I believe you did not have your property on the dozen that we had objections with. What was your address?
333.
I think, can't we just say, can we just make a motion to say, approve this with the understanding that Public Works will allow any property that wants to opt out till next year to opt out. And then with that, we will administer it the way council says, plus giving a 3-year payment plan for those that want to proceed.
Okay.
I would also,
I don't think we can address that. That's not something that council has any sort of expertise to
I would like to
address.
offer myself to go out and look, because I haven't looked at any of these. So anybody who would like to have me come out and look at their property specifically, I will gladly do that.
And she's the cheese. And we're
Well,
not the cheese.
And I will say, Director, I know having owned properties and had different people inspect, particularly someone who's owned multiples, there's nothing more painful when the second person views it differently than the first person. So I
We
think
did
that's-
have one person, do all of the initial inspections, and then we had it reviewed, certain properties reviewed by our senior project
And I know that
engineer.
can create a lot of pain sometimes just by, contrast differences.
Yep.
So,
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion, and if it doesn't seem sufficient, I guess somebody can move that. So I'm gonna move approval of the resolution to order the repair of the sidewalk at the locations included in the list attached to our agenda, with the understanding that any property owner on that list has the option to defer their repairs to the next fiscal year.
May I make a friendly amendment to that?
Sure.
And DPW will investigate the discrepancies between lots, between the discrepancies between assessments. Because I just hadn't gotten to that yet. Thank you.
Sure. Does that seem, okay. I'll accept that amendment, Councilmember Babcock. Thank you.
May I ask you to repeat the, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I move approval of the resolution to order the repair of the sidewalk at the locations included in the list attached to our agenda, with the understanding that any property on that list that wishes to defer their repairs to the next fiscal year is allowed to do so, and with the understanding that the Department of Public Works will investigate possible discrepancies in the assessment of damaged concrete squares.
second. Discussion?
I just want to say that if I received this bill for the sidewalk, as Mayor pointed out, like, it's the start of the school year, but that's like a whole credit card limit, that someone might have, or like a person like me might have. And as far as like prioritizing paying something like that in like such a short period of time is really difficult, for me to feel comfortable supporting in any type of way without reevaluating. And this might seem sidebar, but I feel like it's not, because they had to do it prices. When we received a presentation on the deer and other options, fencing was brought up, and that it would cost residents $700, and that was an inequity. And that's what the argument was. But here we are billing people to pay for their sidewalks in huge amounts, and not really thinking about like people's paychecks or people's pay that comes into their home and how to spread that out like in a fair way. So I liked when Mayor pointed out that we should do it perfectly. I like thinking about that, or just kind of revisiting how this was done, and I'm going to be voting no.
Thank you. All right. All in favor? Aye. Oppose?
Aye.
Motion carries 3-1. Right here, I'm going to call for a break. 5 minutes. Welcome back. Now we're on to the business agenda. Item 5.1, consideration of a text amendment to reduce fence setback along certain city streets.
Thank you very much. So good evening, everyone. My name is Peter Menser. I'm the Planning and Zoning Administrator for the city. We're going to stay on the streetscape theme for just a little bit longer. So I appreciate the opportunity to address all of you this evening. Topic of fences came up this time last summer on the heels of 2 variance requests that were denied by the Zoning Board of Appeals. One was for property on Saginaw Highway that was a through lot, so a through lot would have frontage on 2 streets. In this case, that property had frontage on Audubon, but then had a back frontage on Saginaw Highway that wasn't really, they didn't consider that to be their front yard, but the lots do back up to Saginaw Highway in that area. The other one was on a corner lot on Abbott Road that is on the west side of Abbott Road that just is also another through lot that had street frontage on 3 streets. So both kind of challenging spots for fences, but it raised kind of the larger issue of, is our current fence ordinance and the regulations doing the job? Is it what we were expecting? And following those meetings, a resident asked council to look into this topic. We are now finally getting around to that review. So what I'd like to do tonight in a very, very brief manner is provide an overview of the current fence regulations and introduce a couple of policy options as to how we might tweak the ordinance to be more flexible, but while still retaining standards to protect visibility for pedestrians, for bicyclists, motorists, but also maintaining the character that has developed in the city's neighborhoods. So then, if you're on board in concept with some of the changes that are proposed, or at least some of the options that you've got in considering this policy, I did include a motion to introduce a text amendment and send a draft ordinance to the Planning Commission for them to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation. So if you could, oh, there we go. I've got a very brief, undecorated PowerPoint we're going to go through here. So I think we all know the general issues that are inherent with fences, just hitting the high points, but we use them for privacy, for noise, protection from traffic, pedestrian safety, children and animals in yards, and then visual screening, lights from cars, and all kinds of other things. Next. So our existing policies are, I just want to talk generally about the regulatory scheme that we've got going on here in the city. So that's, we regulate by fence type. Really, it's 2 categories. One, it's by opacity. So can you see through the fence or can you not see through the fence? We've got different standards for each one of those. I'll take a look at current setbacks, current height limitations, what we do when there's a fence and an issue related to visibility at corners. And then I just want, as a side note here, note that a building permit is not required for a fence. So a lot of this is just subject to zoning standards. There's no permit required. So this is a policy that we have to communicate to our residents, but there is no follow-up with a building permit. So next, please. Existing policies, just the 2 types that we look at often. The ordinance talks specifically about 40% open and unobstructed. I take that to mean by just the type of fence. So we're looking at like split rail, chain link, picket fence, or wrought iron. These are the typical fences you see in neighborhoods that you can see through that have some sort of openness to them. Next. What we're focused on tonight is more what I would call a privacy fence. Those are the 40% or less open and obstructed, and you see these types of fences around. Very common application in traditional residential subdivision lots, and they provide privacy and security. So if you have a dog could you go out in a yard like this, or you could have your children out playing without fear of them getting outside of the fence. Next. So this is just an example. This is a graphic from our ordinance that talks about setbacks. It's really a transect. So on the left, we're looking at the property line. So for these open type fences, they can be 4.5 feet tall at the property line. Once they are 10 feet back from the property line, they can raise up to 6 feet in height. And I just want to preface all this. We're talking about fences that are on street frontages. So side yard fences or rear yard fences, those can be on the property line right now. That not considering any changes to that, although that could come apart, that could bubble up as part of this discussion. But the specific topic that I feel like we were tasked with addressing was how far fences can be from the street and how tall can they be, really. So next, please. This is the transect for the privacy fence. So this is the 40% or open and obstructed. unobstructed. So at the property line, the fence can be 3 feet tall. When you get 20 feet back, so the setback is 20 feet, then it can go up to 6 feet in height. So you can have a fence on the property line, but the limitation is it can only be 3 feet tall. Once you get 20 feet back, that can be raised up to 6. And again, only on streets with frontages, or this is for fences adjacent to streets. Next, please. There's one exception to that. The ordinance does include a provision that allows 2 additional feet of height, up to a maximum of 8, if the top 2 feet are at least 75% open and unobstructed. Now, we don't do the math on these, but what we're looking at is something that's open, fence toppers, trellis, that kind of thing. You've seen them marketed in different ways. But so the top is open, then it gets you a little bit more height and a little bit more protection, privacy, but it still allows some visibility. Next, please. So another issue related to fences is corner clearance, or sometimes it's referred to as site triangle. Our ordinance right now has a measurement of 40 feet, basically what's called a site triangle, where you go down 40 feet along a street, 40 feet along another street, and where that imaginary triangle connects, it limits the height of the fence. So in our case, it limits it to 3 feet, and that's to protect, and we're going to show some diagrams that illustrate this in a minute here, but that's really to protect so people, whether it's motorists or pedestrians, everybody can see everybody, backing out cars, driving by, walking down the street, that kind of thing. But I've got a diagram here to show it better. So next, please. Considerations for a new policy. There's, fence policy in some aspects of zoning are more art than science. It's based on experience. It's based on looking at other communities. And there isn't necessarily a mathematical equation that says if this is that, then X will be this for fences. So there's a lot of information out there. A lot of communities do things a lot of different ways. So what we did look at was many communities in Michigan, what they do for fences. The typical max height is typically 6 feet. Some of those are at the property line, some of them require setbacks. It just really runs the gamut. But a common provision of that is also almost always a corner clearance ordinance for visibility at the intersection of 2 streets or the intersection of a driveway in a street. Those are kind of policies that you'll see in a lot of different zoning ordinances in Michigan. And I've looked at some national ordinances, and it's the same. It's all over the place. But those are common. You'll see distances, heights, and corner clearance. So some of the things to consider when we talk about new policy are snow clearance. So obviously we have the little tractors that run down the street to clear snow. That snow has to go somewhere. We've got to provide room for them. Safety, ease of maintenance, speed of traffic, pedestrian routes. There are some streets and they're inherently more traveled than others, or along a specific transportation route, whether it's around schools is one where you get a lot of daily pedestrian route, pedestrian traffic. Land uses, lot dimensions, placemaking, and certainly aesthetics. So there's just a lot of different aspects of policy to consider when talking about this. Next, please. So in that vein, we have on the screen right now, and I know you can't see it in detail, you've probably seen something like this. That's the average annual daily traffic. So this is showing East Lansing, and there's no surprises here, but it's Grand River, Saginaw Highway, Hagedorn, Abbott, Bircham are all the most highly traveled streets in the city that are not highways. Next, please. So I want to talk real quickly about policy options. So in looking at this ordinance, rather than just come to you and prescribe something, there are a lot of things to consider. So I wanted to just throw a couple ideas out. So one, we have right now there's the 20-foot setback for fences along streets. Like I said, 3 feet at the property line, 6 feet when you get 20 feet back. One option is to remove that fence setback completely, allow them on the property line. Property lines are typically 1 foot behind the sidewalk, to give you an idea where that might be. One of the considerations I've got, and this is obviously the beginning of this conversation, so there's going to be more voices as we discuss this further, are aesthetic considerations. Sometimes it looks like kind of a tunneling effect when you've got fences right on the property line on neighborhood streets. And also in East Lansing, we've had this policy for years. It looks like since at least the 90s, this setback. So the current properties don't have them right now, and it provides kind of an open streetscape view when you're around town. So it would be a pretty dramatic change to take it back from 20 down to 0, essentially. So talked about those other things. There's other options to reduce the setback to some other distance. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 15 feet, maybe there's some magic number in the middle there. but I'll get to another proposal here in a second. And then keep the ordinance as is at 20 feet. So those are really kind of what we're looking at. What I have got, so,
Can I ask
oh,
you a question?
yeah.
I'm assuming there's a difference between a backyard and a front yard, just because, like, in my neighborhood, all of the developed lots in Shaw back up to Harrison and Saginaw, and they all have fences. Like,
Yes.
right on the property line. But is that because it's their backyard?
It's because it's their rear yard. And
Okay.
we also have a little, there has been an issue over the years where people have put fences, and it's more of an enforcement kind of existing non-conforming issue. So if your neighborhood backs up to Saginaw Highway, you will see there are many fences along Saginaw Highway. I didn't
Yeah.
load all those into the presentation, just to keep it brief.
No, I was just kind of wondering, I don't know, just because.
Yeah,
There are.
they're out there.
Yeah.
Totally recognize they are out there. Abbott, Burcham, Saginaw. I see it a lot on Saginaw and Burcham specifically. But for lots like that do back up to Saginaw Highway, technically those are through lots. They'll have frontage on one street, but then your back frontage is Saginaw Highway. Now, the people that live on those streets certainly don't consider themselves as addressed off of Saginaw Highway. They don't use that frontage. It's dangerous and fast and not fun, I'm sure, for them. So one of the challenges inherently in that is that if you want to protect yourself, I guess, from the moving traffic, I'll speak to Saginaw specifically, the ordinance would only allow you to have a 3-foot tall fence. And so what you've seen are taller fences over time have developed in that area. One of the variance denials that I mentioned earlier was a property on Audubon that was in that exact scenario, and the variance was denied. So, next, please. Okay, there we're on the same page, literally. So one policy option might be to reduce the setback to something in between, and I know this isn't numerically in between, but 5 feet. So the draft ordinance is included in your meeting packet, has 5 feet, really is a starting point to begin the discussion. Now keep in mind this is only for specific streets with high traffic or on specific school routes. That's kind of the caveat to this option. And I'll show you a map here that will illustrate that in a second. So there would be no changes to other properties for now. A couple aspects of this, it's not as visually disruptive. It allows a little more space rather than having the fence right on the property line. It allows access for a number of things if we need to get in there to work on the sidewalk or to address a utility issue or to plow snow. This next one is at 6 feet. That's incorrect. It would actually be 6 feet from the sidewalk. So visual, when you're walking down the street, there'd be 6 feet. If we have the 1 foot off the property line and the 5 feet setback for the fence, the fence would be 5 feet from the sidewalk, if there is a sidewalk. Subjective, but possibly more pleasant for pedestrians and others that are traversing adjacent to them, rather than having a fence right on them. They'd have a little bit of space. Provides a buffer for the property owner pedestrian, allows some space for landscaping or other kind of green space in between that, so you don't just have that wall right on the line. However, if we do go this route, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 8, whatever, if the setback decreases, I do think that there's a need for safety at intersections to consider. So this illustrates what I'm talking about and how we might apply a policy for fences. So here we're just showing maybe applying it to specific streets rather than neighborhoods as a whole, because there are a lot of neighborhoods in the city. There's a lot of things to consider there, very broad policy implications. So if we were to pick specific areas that are particularly prone to high traffic or that are transport routes for schools, there might be an advantage there. This is an example of the kind of thing we're trying to avoid, not to pick on any. Oh, thank you for that.
That looks like Burcham.
Yeah, maybe. But in this case, it's an anonymous property in the city.
Right.
But this is the type of situation we want to try to avoid with a corner clearance ordinance, and because it really can be dangerous for people, not just for the people backing out, but for people walking down the street. We have people that ride bikes on sidewalks, they ride in the street, they walk in both places. So this is just trying to provide everyone with a good visual cue as to who's coming or going. So one way to address that, thank you for the next. One way to address that is the addition of corner clearance provisions. Now the city already does have a corner clearance provision, so this specific diagram is looking at an intersection of 2 streets right now, and this illustrates the site triangle I was talking about earlier. In this example, so the city's ordinance is 40 feet. This example on the screen is 45 feet, so it bumps it up 5 feet, and it basically in this area, between the heights of 3 feet and 10 feet, you wouldn't be able to have anything that would block. So that would be plants, tree, fences specifically, anything that's going to bar visibility there. And I'll just say right off the bat, the intent is not to cut trees down or remove existing vegetation. Would be applying to new items that come along in the streetscape in the future. So that is not, I just want to clarify that now. The city is not interested in cutting anyone's trees down. Next, please. This is an illustration of how this might look at the intersection of a driveway in a street. This is a provision the city does not currently adopt that may be valuable to consider because of that example photo I showed earlier. This is where there are a lot of pedestrian bicycle motorist interactions at the intersection of a driveway and a street, and this is something that could help that. So it would minimize the height of the fence in areas around the driveway and the street. Next, please.
Mr. Mentor, I can't see the dimensions on that one. Could you go back one? I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses.
Yeah, so
Is it
this
30-something feet?
35.
Okay.
Yep, this is proposing 35. And the way it's measured for both of these diagrams, you're not going into the yard. It's a little more beneficial actually to the property owner in this case. You would measure along the street, like along the curb or along where the street edge is. So you'd measure down one way and then up a driveway, connect those imaginary points, and then in that area it would establish your corner clearance or your site triangle. There would be limited height for fences. Next, please. So I just had a couple policy questions I wanted to throw at council. Understanding that you're just being introduced to this topic and you might not feel super strongly about any of this yet. But I'm interested in kind of the appropriateness of the proposed setback. It's fairly dramatic, going from, in this example, from 20 down to 5 feet at the property line. I'm interested in comments on the appropriateness of the two proposed corner clearance provisions. So if we did go with the one that was in the example, it would be an increase of 5 feet from 40 to 45 feet at the intersection of two streets and 35 feet at the intersection of a driveway and a street. If there are any other ordinance changes identified or that are problem areas that you want to bring up now that we might add to a future ordinance. And then agreement with the location for the application of the new standards. So basically the streets I picked that I showed on the map earlier, and those were derived really from traffic counts and from thoroughfares of where people are going to school. And then if interested, the idea here tonight, and it's, there's no rush, but I did think that if you're on board with considering changes to this ordinance, so we might as well get it moving. I have a draft ordinance that's on the packet tonight, kind of to get the ball rolling, to get started with it, that incorporates the numbers I just went over in the presentation. So if you're on board with that, or at least on board with considering a change to this, what we could do is have a motion, I'll share in a second, that we could get this sent to the Planning Commission. They could get into the policy weeds on it and send it back to you with a recommendation, probably a tweaked draft ordinance and they would hold a public hearing, and that would come back to you to hold a public hearing and consider what policy bubbles up from the Planning Commission. And that's all I've got for tonight. Can you put the motion up, please? Or can you go back to the policy questions? Thanks. If there's any discussion around these topics, I'd be happy to answer any questions or just take notes.
Yeah, I'll go first. I think mostly just maximizing the proper utilization by the individual along with safety. What are the break-even points here? And as we start to move by feet, do we lose a bunch of visibility, and does it create new safety hazards? Pedestrian or mostly corners and views, and that I saw the corner cuts and those kind of things. I think safety will be my primary concern. And knowing several corners right now that you can't see around in East Lansing, so I'd hate to create more. So that would be my primary concern with the set forward changings.
Thanks.
So,
Can I ask, you said, but tell me again, the corner clearance, it's anything that's higher than 3 feet?
Yeah, it would be from no fence or any objects taller than 3 feet.
Okay.
And then again, to allow for canopies of trees at 10 feet or above. So kind of that middle ground where they wouldn't be allowed to have any conflicts, any visibility.
But if they wanted to plant a tree and it wasn't quite 10 feet yet, we probably wouldn't give them a hard time about it. I'm just thinking of Glen Karen, walking through that neighborhood. There's many yards that don't have really 35 feet of, maybe it does. Maybe my perception of what 35 feet is obscured, but are we creating a scenario where people can't plant anything in their front yard, right?
Yeah, I've considered, that is not the intent.
Right.
And I'll work with our public works and engineering crew. There's specific street types or street tree that are trees that are best for application at streets. So I know there are some that do keep a pretty narrow
Yeah. And then I'm
middle
thinking
part.
about, some of these major streets are streets that are kind of on my regular walking route. And so, like specifically on Harrison, because it's very close to where I live, you've noticed that people have kind of taken a greenery approach to solving this problem, where like maybe they were told they can't have a fence, so instead they plant some shrubs that maybe were back at one point, but have certainly grown into the sidewalk. And I guess, aesthetically speaking, I'm not bothered by the fences on Bircham and Saginaw, but when I get assaulted by a bush when I'm walking down the sidewalk, it's rather inconvenient, right? So like I'd kind of, as long as the fences are in good repair, I'd almost rather that they have a fence, because they're not going to have to go out and trim it every year, which is not getting done. There's a lot of shrubbery that's very overgrown. I think that these high traffic streets that you've outlined make sense, and I think there are also areas that already have a significant amount of that kind of fencing on them, whether through creeping fences or just through people not knowing that they weren't supposed to do it. And I don't find it terribly bothersome. I guess I wouldn't like to see a situation where every single front yard in East Lansing's got a 6-foot privacy fence in the front of it. That's not very friendly, but on these high trafficked roads, it makes sense for quality of life.
Councilperson Babcock?
We have a family here that had written to us earlier, and they came in just after public comment, and I think they'd like to address it. And I know it's not usually our practice, but I suspect that a member of the public may ask questions that I would ask if I thought of them, so perhaps I'd be allowed to defer to her. That's tap dancing past the Roberts rules, isn't it? The city attorney down there is having a heart attack, but.
You're asking for privilege here.
A point of privilege, please.
Is that okay?
It would be a point of privilege from the mayor.
Okay. All right, 5 minutes.
Councilman Babcock and council for listening to us. I'm Laura Fanning. This is my wife, Jamie Fanning. We live at 1505. Peter, I think, has my cell phone number memorized because we have communicated so much during the last year and a half. So I don't feel like I need to go into lots of details, because I think the main point of this conversation is, do we need to, as a city, decide to move this forward and talk about it more? And I just want to make sure that my voice is heard that, yes, we do. I have very strong feelings about things. And so I don't know that I need to bother you with all of that right now. I would love to have the opportunity to participate in the conversation about the priority. I think my frustration of the way things have been is partially that I feel strongly that if you go around our city, our fences do not match our current policy. And the problem with that is that people just put fences up. And quite honestly, I can maybe think of, and I've looked at the fences in the city. I spent a year and a half watching them. That I can really only think of one in the entire city that I feel like is really inappropriate, even though most of them that I have seen don't follow the code. And so we had an experience with the variance board, which unfortunately was quite negative. Peter got to witness that also. And that's really what led us here, which is that it's not really just about our family, it's about the entire community. And that if there are rules and red tape to lay things down that aren't helping with safety and that aren't improving things for our community, then maybe we need to look at changing them. I think the culture of our city has changed since the 90s when the current policy was made, in that it is about both students and elderly folk and family all living together, and fences are needed by families, and fences are needed by other members too. So I'm just hoping to talk more about that. Our case in particular is we live on the corner of Abbott and Lurie.
And Abbott Woods. We have a weird We don't have
Yeah.
a backyard.
Yeah, yeah.
We only have front property.
And-
So we have no way to keep these kids safe.
Yeah. And we bought an estate home, so we're trying to update it and invest in the life of the home that was there. But what was there is decrepit and was exactly what you were describing, which is they had these ginormous bushes. And we were very naive going into this 1.5 years ago. And so we talked to all of our neighbors, and all of our neighbors were like, yes, your plan of having like a 4-foot fence that's see-through, moved up into a privacy fence when it's away from your driveway is a great plan, and blah, blah, blah. We thought, sure, there's no one against it, it'll go through. And we had no idea that even if everyone around you thinks it's a good idea and is saying, thank you so much for cutting down your bushes, that you can still be told you can't do it. And then you see fences everywhere around the city going up, literally breaking the exact rule that you asked permission for and paid money to do. And so now we just really want to be involved in the change in the city and are hoping that the fence that we have now will not fall down before we make the change, so that we can do something different than what we have right now. So I'm happy. I'm not familiar with this process. I think that you can ask me questions. Is that right? Because I can't ask you questions. I guess I'm just interested if you have any specific questions for me. I have like poured my life into looking at fences the last 1.5 years. So I can tell you that I think there's things that Peter has in there that I would advocate to change or that I would have arguments against. But I think that in general, just starting to say, hey, we need to take a deep look at this is really, it seems like the point that we're at now.
Well, thank you for the comments. I think, just stay close to the process. It sounds like you have Peter's ear as the planning portion goes forward, and then there'll be public hearings on it. So you'll have another opportunity to bring your A game and let us know what you
And be
think
more
of the
prepared.
Yeah, there'll
Okay.
be much more time.
Okay.
This is just the beginning.
The planning commission will really probably do the heavy lifting on exactly what the technical parts of the policy will be.
Yeah.
And we generally pass them almost in the form that we receive them because they're the body that has the expertise. So, and they have kind of, Peter will keep you in the loop about when they're talking about it, but that's really the body to give your specific critique.
Feedback to.
Yeah,
And I can
exactly.
do that through email or a public hearing.
It's always more powerful when you come in person. I've dragged my kids to meetings, so I definitely understand that that's a burden. But I think the Planning Commission also does have a virtual comment.
They do. Yep.
Yeah.
You can call in, just like we have the option here.
Yeah, so if it's not possible for you to come in person, you can always, phone in, essentially. So it's almost in person, but an email is good too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your engagement.
So to conclude, if you are interested in moving on this process, I've included a motion it's on the screen here, just to get the process started. Send this to the Planning Commission, and eventually you'll see it come back. Maybe not in the same form as it is now.
Go ahead. I'll look for a motion. Anybody got it handy?
I move that we authorize Mr. Menser to pursue updating the fencing ordinance, which is section 50147 parentheses 1. I need new glasses to revise the standards, and I look forward to public participation in that process. So,
Do we have to specify sending it to the Planning Commission?
Yeah.
All right. Can I friendlily amend your motion? I'd like to just amend that to say that we would transmit it to the Planning Commission for public hearing and recommendation. I'm closer to the screen than you, so.
Yep. And I'll second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Okay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next up, item 5.2, consideration of contract with Levitt and Stark Excavating, Inc. for the fiscal year 2022 Hazardous Sidewalk Program, Chesterfield Neighborhood, in the amount of $509,885, and authorizing city manager to sign.
So again, this is just the contract for the work that was identified by our engineering staff to be done. This includes city and residential work within the Chesterfield neighborhood. We bid this out and received 2 bids on August 8th, 2022. Levitt and Stark was the low bid, and we are requesting a 15% contingency to be added to the contract for unforeseen construction items.
Questions?
I was going to move approval.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll move approval of a contract with Levitt and Stark Excavating for the fiscal year 2022 Hazardous Sidewalk Program, and authorize this, in the amount of $509,885, and authorize 500. Did I said that right? Yeah. And authorize the city manager to sign.
Second. Discussion.
How does our conversation tonight change this?
So we would just spend less. It's an up to, I mean, it doesn't require you just.
It's a per.
Okay.
It's an itemized contract,
So-
we don't authorize anything more.
Good.
Just to open a can of worms, if
No.
people in other parts of the city know that they have sidewalks that are degraded, can we somehow offer people the option to opt in to getting their sidewalk repaired, even if they're not on the hazardous program?
It changes the scope of the work of how we bid it out.
Okay.
We bid out specific items throughout this neighborhood, so it's
Right.
3 streets. We do a miscellaneous concrete project, which is why that, and that's
Yeah.
pieces all over the city. And that's a little bit more expensive because it's smaller loads. It's, the contractor not getting in.
Considerably make it quite larger, right? I guess, just from our conversation tonight, it is quite apparent that many of our residents do not realize that they have a responsibility to maintain the sidewalk in front of their house. I think we saw, many comments tonight saying things like the city has not replaced these sidewalks, when actually, if you look at the ordinance as written, it is the responsibility of the homeowners to replace the sidewalks before they are degraded. And I think we just saw that very few of our residents know that. And if they suddenly now, because of this very public discussion, realize that they've got that responsibility, and there's, a contract at a affordable rate that they could opt into, I don't know. So sorry to drop that into the conversation, but as we're thinking about this program going forward, maybe we could structure it in a way where people can, I don't know, take advantage of the city contract and not have to do their own sidewalk because, I don't know, anyway.
And I think we would just have to scope it that way as it was bid out.
Yeah.
In a contract, and that is something that we can consider.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe we consider it in next steps, where we talked about some of the other next steps.
Yep.
If not, okay.
Okay. Anyway, I think we've got a motion on the table.
Yep. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Nicole.
Next up, item 5.3, discussion, consideration of an application to rename public property.
So I can start, Mayor. We received this application to my office on Friday. This application is typically supposed to go to a work session, but because of the unavailability of a work session, we requested from you that we list it as a discussion and consideration of an application to rename public property. So this is from a resident, and the name escapes me right now, Dr. Nicole Biber, who's looking to rename a public park based on a Native American Indian name. And I think that the names and the committee members are still to all be discussed. The step for council would be, if they decided to go this direction, is to say yes. And then the mayor would impanel a group through his selection. And that group could have up to 90 days to make a recommendation back to council on the renaming of public property. And there's policies that would be given to the people and guidelines and such. So first step is this step of discussion if council wants to proceed.
This is an embarrassing admission from somebody that's a representative of this community, but who is Abbott and why do we have so many things named after them? Okay.
And that
But
would be
well recognized by other things that are already named in his honor.
Abbott Road.
Yes, like a big road, right, okay.
So next steps, do we, Dr. Biber is the originator of the project. Can we hear briefly just, do you want to speak or? You can give us the nickel version. Yeah, whatever you would like to do, just to give us the kind of some framework as we move forward.
Yeah, this is I was honored to be approached by Elaine Hardy as our DEI person. Always on the lookout for how we can recognize and acknowledge Indigenous Peoples Day beyond, the occasional land acknowledgement or just saying, hey, it's Indigenous Peoples Day. So something that would be lasting, something that would be in the public eye, a high visibility, but also very much connected to the continuity of our culture is absolutely always has been tied to the possibility of restoration of the natural world. And I think the park, when Elaine brought me there, it's a beautiful space. I think, there's some problems with invasives like there are in a lot of places, but I think if, so many people like to go by there already and to see a recovery with that and connect it to our Indigenous language, I think it'd be a really nice educational space for children, for the community, but also as a gathering place for Anishinaabeg people who are living in East Lansing. We don't have a lot of ways to run into one another, and this would be something I think that would draw us together. And there's another person I could, put in your notice who would probably be interested in the committee, Cheryl Dudley, and she's a Black woman, but she has Indigenous heritage, like so many people do, So I think, again, with that gathering of the Anishinaabe community, but also the opportunity for public education and just sort of the tying of what it is to be Indigenous to that restoration of the natural world would be very meaningful.
Thank you. Yep. And having sat with parks with you, Dr. Biber, I know your commitment to all these things. You taught me a lot just in the short time period around this. And I know in the selection process, I definitely want guidance and want to be both culturally sensitive to the framework of this process, as well as, I'll take the lead, but I'll be looking for a lot of guidance to make sure we handle this with a lot of cultural sensitivity and otherwise as we move forward. I think it's important. That process is going to be as important as what we do with the park. So I'll be looking for guidance from you guys, from you and a handful of other individuals, hopefully Native individuals or people who can kind of guide. Yes. So bring that forward and we'll talk and then look to try to form the committee around that and just make sure that we're at all very sensitive and just aware of what we do and that we do everything in proper order. So it'd be great. So thank you. Comments, questions?
Well overdue, and thank you very much, both of you, for coming up with the idea and pursuing it.
Do you have to do anything or just say?
Do we need a motion here?
Let's make a motion, approve a motion, and then the mayor would take the next steps beyond that.
Okay.
Let's see. So we would just move approval of the
Establishment of a park naming committee.
Okay.
As per the application, the mayor to decide the membership.
Sorry, got it. Okay. So I'll just move approval of the creation of a park naming committee to consider renaming Abbott Road Park in honor of our Indigenous people.
Second.
With the mayor to determine to appoint the members of the committee.
There it is. All right. Discussion. All right.
Sounds great.
All right. Yeah.
Can't wait to hear what you come up with.
I'm excited. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Screen went off there. All right. On to item 5.4, consideration of extension of a lease between the City of East Lansing and Margaret F. Metzger as trustee of unrevocable trust agreement of Margaret F. Metzer, date June 11th, 1986, in the Fabian Enterprises LLC to allow the city to continue to utilize the majority of the Bailey surface parking lot number 11.
Great. Hello, Mayor and Council. My name is Tom Fehrenbach. I'm the Director of Planning, Building, and Development for the city. And I will just briefly give you a little background on Bailey Parking Lot 11. The city owns approximately 29% of the lot on the eastern side, and you can see in this picture the part the city owns, which is just off of the entranceway. And then on the right-hand side, you see the picture denoting the parcel that is owned by the ownership group, which is approximately 71% of the lot. We have been leasing that for a number of years, which I'll get into in a moment. But we are looking at the possible, just to give you a little context about kind of where we are with the system and with Bailey Lot 11. Overall, our net income on Bailey Lot 11 in particular has long-term been decreasing. And we're looking at increased expenses and increased lease costs over the various several years. The lot itself will need significant capital investment soon. We've sort of been doing the kind of fixing maintenance, but eventually there's only so long you can do that, and we'll need to do complete reinvestment. And overall, if you look at the parking system, we have very low occupancy. Our most recent counts indicated an average of 51% occupancy at peak times. So it's very low for a system that we'd ideally be operating at 85 to 95% occupancy. So as a context for kind of thinking about this, staff really does have concerns with continuing to lease private property when the public property that is essentially the rest of our system is so underutilized. And we really are looking at long-term an alternate approach, probably including converting the city-owned property, the 29%, to a pay-on-foot lot, which would decrease our cost to run the lot in terms of maintenance, in terms of staffing, and would essentially net us an estimated $120,000 after expenses. The original lease with the ownership group was entered into in April of 2000. I think it was intended to be a short-term solution, although we had negotiated at that time several 5-year extensions, and they ultimately were all exercised. There's a base lease at that point, plus a CPI adjuster. The city agreed to pay the taxes and take on the insurance liability. We also agreed to be responsible for maintenance. Ultimately, in fiscal year 20, the payments we paid out were approximately $119,000 plus the $18,000 in taxes. So you can get a sense for kind of the $137,000 a year we were paying. Of course, as you all know, that it was set to expire in June 30th, and just as we were kind of getting into the COVID pandemic. I will point out that during that particular time, the ownership group worked with us. We were all in a state of uncertainty, significant uncertainty based on the effects of the pandemic and sort of the necessary responses. And they worked with us to share the risk in really a revenue and cost sharing model to the lease. That's spelled out here. I won't go into detail. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. But essentially, they shared in the risk, and when things got better, they took the majority of the upside. And certainly that was helpful. We certainly appreciate that, and it did reduce the risk for the city at that particular time. Ultimately, last year, when that lease was coming up for was expiring, the city council at that point determined to extend that cost-sharing agreement one additional year. It is now coming up on that expiration at the end of the month. The result for fiscal year 22 is in front of you now. You can see that the ownership group netted after expenses, of which they had none, $172,000, and the city netted after our expenses and taxes, et cetera, approximately $86,000. In March of 22, we began renegotiating this contract. Staff was very clear that the long-term picture in terms of what we would recommend to council would not include continuing to lease Lot 11, at least their 71% of it, based on the concerns we have that I outlined earlier, and that we would ultimately probably be seeking that alternate result. We told them that we could be supportive of a short-term agreement with a very specific lower cost amount for the city, and we indicated ultimately support of a $100,000 straight lease for 1 year. We were very specific that we were likely not to request that to be extended. We'd no longer want to be paying the taxes, and essentially that would allow time for a transition to occur. Based on that model, we would anticipate that the city would net after expenses of approximately $163,000, and that the Metzger-Fabian would net after taxes approximately $80,000. Their response was really indicating their desire to stay the course on the current revenue sharing model. They feel that that they've been a good partner during the uncertainty of COVID, that this would allow them that year of additional upside, and that they'd still be sharing the risk if things went south. And so that was really kind of the distance between us as of today. And as you can see, with their model, with the same estimated revenues, which are conservative, they'd be netting $165,000. The city would be netting $78,000. So I think what we're really looking at here is, a possibility that we're too far apart, and preparing ourselves for the possible expiration of this lease basically on September 1st of this year. In the long term, the expiration of this lease may be inevitable anyway, as the owners have indicated their desire long-term to possibly redevelop their portion of the site. Obviously, there will be ramifications for the parking system. There are several users that are very used to parking in the surface lots. There are businesses adjacent to the lot. There's the possibility that the ownership group will decide to go through our process and convert their portion of the lot to a parking lot servicing those businesses and essentially competing with us. But ultimately, the city-owned portion could be fairly simply reconverted into a pay-bound-foot for the 35 spaces that we occupy or that we own. So ultimately, our recommendation really is to come up with what is the council's last, best, and final offer to extend this lease for 1 year. And the recommendation by staff is to stick to the $100,000 annual payment that we had come to at the end of our conversations with the ownership group. So that is our recommendation. The motion is in front of you for consideration. Be happy to answer any questions. I will point out that Mr. Sharrow, our parking administrator, is in the building as well if you have technical questions. And thank you.
No technical questions, but I feel like he's been here this long. He should get to do something. But yeah, it's actually rare, that as a city where it seems like we ever have leverage. Obviously anyone who can look around knows that the east parking is about as appealing as it's the least appealing thing in the city. They have very little leverage with us on this discussion. So I mean, it's, as far as the staff recommendation, it seems, to me, I'd be inclined to support whatever you'd like to do, but I find, for once, I feel like you guys have leverage, and really, their offer is not very appealing, obviously. So, yeah, move forward from my perspective on that, because it's so rare that we actually have leverage, so it's nice. So, questions?
So I'm trying to understand about the money piece of it and the percentages. They're not taking money from us. It's like we want what they are able to get, but it's not damaging like our budget or anything like that.
Well, it's the opportunity cost. So essentially, for the benefit of adding 71% to our parking lot, we are giving them, a base rent of $3,000 a month, and then allowing them to take the majority share of the profits, if you will, the net income after expenses are booked. So those expenses are $6,000 a month for staffing costs, and the portion of the the 1/12 of the cost for taxes and insurance per month. So though the way this is structured, that kind of takes some of the risk out of it for the city, because we would use the revenues that come in first to pay those expenses. However, since we're back into a realm of pretty standard usage of our lot, there's less risk of us going under that, and more risk of us losing because of the percentage that we're giving away in terms of profit to them. And it should be noted that we're giving that for the whole lot, even though 29% of it is owned by the city.
Questions? Owning 29% of a lot is the most East Lansing thing ever. It seems straightforward, unless I'm missing something.
We need to make the recommended motion. I've got it up.
Yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like I've moved everything tonight,
I'll
but
let
that's
you
all right.
move it.
Okay, I will move approval of, I will make a motion to authorize staff to approve, it's a long night, a one-year lease extension of the lease between the city and Margaret F. Metzger as trustee under revocable trust agreement of Margaret F. Metzger dated June 11th, 1986, and Fabian Enterprises LLC to allow the city to continue to utilize the majority of the Bailey Surface parking lot, lot number 11, at the rate of $100,000 annually, $8,333.33 per month, in a form approved by the city attorney.
Second. Discussion? Hearing seen none. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to former item 3.5, now item 5.5, approval of street closure for a portion of Linden Street and a portion of Grove Street for the From Fiber to Fashion Festival scheduled for October 22nd, 2022.
So I would appreciate it if my fellow council members would recuse me from voting on this item. My store is one of the sponsoring entities for this festival. I do feel inclined to point out that we're not making money off of this. This is something that we offer to the artists free of charge, and we even actually provide some infrastructure just as kind of a way to introduce new potential businesses to East Lansing. We did it last year the first time, and it was really fun, so we want to do it again, but I cannot vote on it.
Attorney Chubb, does she stand recused, or I need to move her?
I think you guys have to vote
Move it.
recused.
I move to recuse Mayor Pro Temp Jesse Grigg from item 5.5 due to conflict, perceived conflict.
Second.
All right, discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks, guys.
And as far as discussion from my perspective on this item, this is just one of those, it's more of a broader discussion around the street closure question, and obviously our forms. I just like things to be uniform, and obviously we had other people approach us around the street closures that we, for Adam's team, for planning, for everywhere else that we, and I had talked to Adam about a future presentation, kind of talking about what went well this summer, and then like discussions around this, around street closures and things like that, that we make sure that we have uniformity and those types of things for when people are approaching us. And from my perspective, us a couple other individuals, and it came from out of one of the recent business meetings that we were in, and also from individuals from another set of businesses looking to close, that we definitely, the answer is yes, from council's perspective. In that we figure out just how to scale it and what's appropriate and timing it moving forward, and from your team and that kind of thing. And then just in general, as we're trying to do these placemaking activities and closures, that the answer is yes before they even answer it. So we want to be supportive of local business and create an environment that really incubates and helps them generate and frankly pay their bills and stay in their places. It's harder to replace a business than it is and displace a business than it is to keep them and just give them some things that help them to stay in business and pay their rent. So we'll be flexible and try to do those things. And then for the Adam's team and the stuff you're doing, just to help us show us how to help you guys to build off of what's already happened, and then you guys are the closest to these types of requests and that kind of thing, and let us know how we can get them. And kind of coming out of the business meeting at Newman Lofts, it's like, historically everyone has some horror story of something that they wanted to do for East Lansing historically, and how it didn't happen, and if it had unfolded and where it unfolded somewhere else at, and what it meant for that community. I just don't want to be part of that legacy anymore. For that, we want to capture that, and particularly with some of our youthful energy and creatives and things like that, and even capture more of it and build more culture and more stuff around it. So this is my soapbox, but we're going to build off that energy. I'm older. I don't have any idea what's new or what's cool, so I want to hear from them and do those things. So along with this, and since Mayor Pro Tem, this is cool to me. This is just something different, something I completely don't understand, but I know it's cool. So
I'll say I'm old and not cool too. We're bringing wool. It's like super not cool, but that's okay.
The
It's good
title
wool.
is so cool. It feels like I might even show up just by accident.
I heard the mayor of East Lansing is considered the coolest cat in town and the coolest mayor in Michigan. Just a rumor.
I'll take it. All right. Do
Do we have to vote in? Do we have to roll call for closed session?
I have to move this first?
You have to motion for the fiber. Did we approve?
I think we did, yeah.
I thought you were accused.
No, excuse.
You're out, so I have to move
me, but we
it.
didn't actually vote it through.
So
Well, please vote on
I'll
it.
move it first. Do I have to
Because
move
like
it,
to-
correct? Okay. I'll move approval of street closure for a portion of Linden Street and a portion of Grove Street for the From Fiber to Fashion Festival scheduled for October 22nd, 2022.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I was just wondering, isn't one of those streets closed right now? Not. I mean, I don't know if you can answer, but I was wondering
There's a road closed
staff
sign on Linden, but it's not. It's closed at Albert for al fresco, so that will be reopened by this point, and then it will be closed on the other side of the parking garage entrance. So the only section that's closed off is from the first residential driveway on Linden up to the entrance to the parking garage, and it's like a 12-hour closure. So.
You got a picture.
Yes, yeah. And I went to the festival. It was a nice festival. It was fun.
Cool. With no further discussion, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, at this point, we'll be moving to item 6.1. We'll be moving into the closed session. We'll only be returning back to the chamber to adjourn the meeting. So everyone else, you're free to go home and do that part of it. And we'll just return back to this chamber to adjourn. So thank you all for your participation tonight, and have a wonderful night.
I think we need a roll call vote.
Okay, motion. Okay.
Do Well,
Jo-
I move to enter closed session to conduct a personnel evaluation of City Manager George Lahanas, who has requested that the evaluation be conducted in closed session.
Second. Discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry, record roll call, yes.
Councilmember Watson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg,
Yes.
Mayor Bacon.
Yes. Oh.
Sorry, I need move by to return to open.
Welcome back. I'll look for a motion to return to open session.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Good night, everyone. Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.